If you had one book or one person that inspired you the most your entire life, what would that book be and who would that person be and why? It could be both.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Like I brought him up earlier, Miyamoto Musashi, a Ronin.
Yep.
He is what made me into my modern day Ronin.
Right.
He influenced me so much that I traveled to Japan and went to the town of Kyomoto and went to his cave where he wrote the Book of Five Rings, and I meditated there.
Yep.
I meditated on that rock, and then I went to his final resting place, and I paid honor to Musashi for giving me the way, giving me strength to show me that I had, that eternal strength,
right.
That I was looking elsewhere, but it was always here. It was always in me.
That's funny. That book, I don't remember who brought it up, and it was recently, and someone said the Book of Five Rings, and now you're bringing it up.
Is historically correct. I do know your affinity with ninjas gave us this opportunity for me to watch you be intrigued by Tu's story time about ninjas. So Tu, if you would, educate us about the ninja world.
So story time with Tu.
There you go. Story time with Tu.
I mean, the shinobis, the ninjas, that was truly a story of unconventional warfare at its finest, right? Mm-hmm. So think about back on Sun Tzu, right? So the art of war, Sun Tzu, right? He was a recognized military general in the Qin dynasty, right, China. And they through his tactics, they were able to unify all of China. His tactics were extremely effective at its time. So you think about unconventional warfare has always been there. Mm-hmm. When I say unconventional warfare, is hit and run, sabotage operations, reconnaissance, but Sun Tzu actually doctrinized it into an SOP, a TTP, where these soldiers were employing these tactics, right? So he was able to unify all of China with these tactics. They work,
right?
So as early as the year 900, monks started migrating from China into Korea, where they practiced the art of Zen meditation. A lot of these monks were warriors of the Qin dynasty, right? So they were these warriors that fought in these battlefields, and as they migrated, they wanted to seek a life of peace, a life of serenity. So around the year 1100, they started migrating more into Japan, where it was they were able to establish these training camps and practices in their temples, and the monks in these terrains called Iga and Oga province. The area was very steep. Think about like Afghanistan, Pakistan type of terrain, right? In Japan, very vegetated, but very steep terrain. Perfect terrain for unconventional warfare. Absolutely. Or the birth of it, right? So these monks came in and they practiced the art of meditation and the practice of a peaceful life, because that's part of the path of enlightenment. Right? So during that process, they had to protect their temples from the bandits and the robbers coming in. Back then, it was a warring state of Japan. It was, it's total anarchy, kind of. Samurais try to rule their areas underneath their daimyos, but there's always rebels. There was always, bandits coming in and fighting the villages. So the monks wanted to practice in peace, so they started training the villagers the art of unconventional warfare, basically the doctrines of Sun Tzu, right? So a lot of that work was almost a lot of reconnaissance, a lot of surveillance, of being able to gather information and then come back and develop a course of action. So that was more their tactics back then. So in time, these protectors, these eyes and ears of the monks, right, became hired mercenaries. Through generations of fine-tuning their training, hit and run, sabotage operations, demolitions, hostage rescue. I mean, they did it, man. Yeah. They were truly the special forces. So the samurais being the samurais during the war staging periods of Japan was around 1100 to 1600s, right? And the samurais, they had different shoguns at the times, and under daimyos that served underneath the shoguns. They would clash. I mean, it was total civil war going on. In fact, Japan closed off its borders to the world, and they were fighting internal conflicts. Well, samurais believed in a certain ethical code.
Kind of like conventional.
They are, but they were knights, right? So they lived a royal life. They don't fight dirty.
Right.
You know what I mean? And the ninjas, truly the word ninja actually mean one that endures. Right? Shinobi came out of a tactic that the Japanese saw, that employment of unconventional warfare, shinobis, right? So the samurais of his time, the generals, the shoguns, right, employ covert assassins of the ninjas. They would basically put load signals out, and the ninjas would go through their routes every day, and there's a load signal, and then they'll appear at the shogun's door going, okay, what's the order? Because a lot of times, like I said, it's frowned upon to do assassination missions, the hit and run type of ops, but that's the way to win warfare, we know that. All right, and in fact, Takagawa, he was the shogunate that actually unified all of Japan. It was in textbook. He employed ninjas. They actually took his family hostage at one time, and they wanted to see his alliance, and he employed ninjas to go and scale. Yeah, and the ninjas, what they did was they set fires to burning locations, so the samurais had to rush to that area, but the target is their deception. That is the prime tactics of a commando raid, unconventional warfare, right? So they're employing a lot of these tactics back in, during the war staging periods of Japan. And that right there was the ultimate definition of UW, be able to go in, force multiply, be able to read terrain, understanding funnel points in that terrain, right? So after the peace periods started, after Takagawa was able to unify all of Japan, right, then he had to take out the ninjas, the rebels, right, up in this area. So the ninjas welcomed them because they knew that they had to funnel in their armies. Remember, it's steep terrain, and they would pick away at them. And what they looked at as, a farm, it was actually an underground fortress, right, that they've been building. And the ninjas, in the Iga province, they held off a superior military force by unconventional warfare.
No kidding.
So after the war, when I say the war is after World War II, there was a disarming of Japan, and the arming of Japan, and then the Bushido Code. They were trying to, basically do away with it because that's, the warrior class, right? Yeah. So they wanted more of a peaceful Japan after World War II. So General MacArthur, disarmed all of Japan. They had to turn in their swords that dated back all year, and they banned them, they cut them. The swords that actually survived were the swords that went underneath ground, right? The practices that you see today in Ninjutsu or in some kind of martial arts like Iaido, the swords, that all went underground. That became illegal. So what you truly see, the practice of Japan today was all, practices of underground, forbidden, tabooed after the war. So it was really cool to see that a tactics of like ninjutsu, which works, UW survived, but that was really one of in my studies of UW, that was one of the very first recorded, doctrinized, SOP'd war, was Sun Tzu, and Sun Tzu was actually what tied into the ninjas. So a lot of people don't know that, but that's what happened.
Well, I like hearing too that one who endures.
It's why I've always wanted to be a ninja.
Well, you are a ninja. You're a modern day ninja. But the thing is this: what is so unique about the studies is that the samurais their Bushido code surrounds to readily accept death. You know, I mean, truly, that's what it translates to. It means to readily accept death, right? For God, country, purpose, right? They would stick a dagger into their stomach and disembowel themselves through the ritual subaku to save their honor. It's about, you know, life and death. They'll choose death over losing their honor. Ninjas, they don't give a fuck. You know, they realize they don't live an honorable life anyways, right? They lie, cheat, steal, to do whatever they need to complete the op. Very much like a special forces kind of mindset where we understand that, you know, you meet violence with more violence. You outthink your enemy. You always conduct reconnaissance. Well, they were employing that back in the year 900s, man.
Yeah, but you know what I just thought of, man, is ignorance, right? Ignorance of, and then information. And the only correlation I can draw that it's like you just told me the story of true ninjas. And what you really described was what would have appeared to be nothing but a commoner, probably someone who lived out in a village, who secretly, you know, was a father by day, was a husband by day, like was part of this thing. Yet, if you up until that story time last night, actually, if you just said what's a ninja, well, I grew up watching Kung Fu theater. I mean, I know what a ninja is.
Yeah.
They wear one thing, they look one way. This is the sounds it fucking makes whenever they lop a head off, right? Now, humor aside, like that's pretty much what the public thinks about us. So they don't know they don't see the common aspect of life, right? And the lives that we live outside of what they see on a movie. Right, because you just described guerrilla warfare. It was like, cool, they had swords back then. That's what they used. Whenever, if you look at Sun Tzu, what Sun Tzu did there, we talked about the Southerners did in guerrilla-style ambushes, climbing trees. That was, right, same thing. So we see that same cycle, you know, repeated over and over again, and it really brings us full circle to one of the conversations that we had is the disassociation between society and the warrior.
Yeah.
But yeah, that back to that stereotype versus like, no, this was the reality of how that happened. And wow, it's like, I at least have a different alternate picture than Kung Fu theater now.
Yeah.
You know,
But then all the principles, you know what I mean? It's like, and the importance of knowing history and everything. Because then you look at the American Revolution.
Yeah.
You mean
That's
you had
such
your
a beautiful
conventional
story.
guys and
Yeah.
stuff, but then you have like all these legendary folks, whether it's Marion's Marauders, you know what I mean, Rogers Rangers, you know, all of these aspects. It took, you know what I mean, everybody has their part in it. You know, some people are really good, you know, conventionally, you know, in doing that kind of stuff, and then these other people that are a little bit kind of loose cannons that think differently, that, you know, have a different structure to themselves. You know, I mean, whether it's in Japan, whether it's in the U.S., whether it is that whole aspect of unconventional warfare. You know,
well,
I mean,
it's
and how
spec
effective-
ops was for guys that really didn't want to be in,
Be in
the,
the
army,
military,
but
that-
they wanted to serve.
Yeah.
Like the entrepreneurs of the military,
Yeah.
the free thinkers, the problem solvers.
And what I love about my military experience, especially my experience as a Green Beret, is that I fought like a tribe. You know, I fought like a primitive native before because that's all we had. You know, when you go into these AORs, I mean, you are embedded with the tribe, the rebel, whatever force. You're feeling it. You're eating their food. You're sleeping right next to them. You're utilizing their weapons. You don't have, you know, the advanced weaponry of maybe we see in some other units, right? So you're truly like, well, a great incident was a great example was, dude, we made claymores out of coffee cans because that's all we had.
Yeah.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And we use shrapnel, we use rocks and glass and nails.
Yeah.
We fought like rebels. We fought like tribes before because we understand the art of war.
Yeah.
We can go back to the roots of 500 BC, or we can go into modern day war where we're dropping bombs on people. Sun Tzu, on one of his teachings, said that he who owns fire wins the fight. And he said this in 500 BC. He wants fire, wants to fight. Well, I'm a modern day warrior of the teachings of Sun Tzu in modern warfare. Well, I've dropped bombs on people before. And he who owns the sky dropping bombs is fire in my eyes, right? Same thing. It's the same mindset. It's just same teaching, right?
Yeah,
But it's
different
just
tools.
different
New
tools.
technology.
Yeah. And that's what the ninjas did, you know. They are able to take a primitive hit and run tactics, guerrilla warfare, using auxiliary underground units and all that, and they're able to successfully defeat armies. Same thing as we did as colonists when we were winning our independence from the British.
Yeah, that was the thing that comes to mind for me too, especially in like you hear conventional mindset, unconventional mindset, you know, in the military, and it takes both. You know what I mean? Because that's not taken away from conventional folks. You know what I mean? Because that's how they're wired. They're very good at it. You know what I mean? That's what they do. And even in today, you know, with law enforcement, it's like there's two different folks, and they haven't been named yet, but we're about to name them, Scott. I'm going to name them.
Do it, Tony.
Yeah, you ready? It's so you know, you always hear sheepdog,
Yes.
right? And that's very accurate. But a sheepdog, you know what I mean, by nature of what they do is react to something that's happened, that's coming. They're defensive by nature, and then they go offensive once a trigger is met, you know what I mean, which is the huge part of our conventional forces, say, in law enforcement. But just like the military, there's another section, which is the section that we were in our military that, hey, you know, they always talk about, and it's wolves, you know what I mean, because, you know, because wolves, you know what I mean, used to be, you know, treasured back in primal times because of they have one mate for their whole life. They're huge tribal, not tribal, but they're pack, you know, and all that stuff, you know, and, but you have this segment of the military and of law enforcement that aren't reactive, that are proactive. You know what I mean? They're out there, and there's a fine line between the bad guy, because, I mean, in the sheepdog concept, they mention, hey, you're not like them, you know what I mean? And it's true. But as we know, there's just a fine line between us and the bad guys on the unconventional side.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We chose a path of doing good.
The tactics and mindset is the same.
It's the same.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same if you're out there in the thick of it, undercover, like doing all those different things, who are offensively going after the bad guys. You know what I mean? Those are the good wolves. You know what I mean? And it's because everybody likes to think, oh, wolves bad and all this and that, and it's like, no, man, it's not that at all.
You know,
it's just two different segments.
People ask me, you know, well, how can you separate, you know, what is fair, what is unfair in war? You know, like, you know, you got rules of engagement. And I say, absolutely, we got rules of engagement. You follow that by the T. That's the law. But when you're talking about warfare, is it fair or unfair? I said, you know, I used to think the world was fair until I was drugged out in the streets at 2 years old, and my family was gunned down in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I used to think things were fair until I went into Africa, and a girl got kidnapped, and she shows up in the middle of a open market with an IED strapped to her, and now they're blowing up civilians now with the little girl. You know, I used to think things were fair.
Yeah.
So my mindset on what's fair and what's not fair is, you know, it's different. You know, and my tactics is different because of it. I don't have rules when it comes to the enemy, unless the rules that the government binds me to, because I serve my military, I serve America, you know. But we win wars by being unconventional. We won America by being unconventional, you know. The ninja story, I mean, they where they're at because they're unconventional. It's the conventional mindsets why I think that we're dragging this war out a little longer than it should be, you know, because they're engaging unconventional warfare on us now. It's right. We don't. When we go overseas, the enemy is not defined in a uniform. You know, not in the Middle East. You know, so who's who, what's what, right? So we're playing those games too. You know, and I just know we win wars by being truly unconventional. You know.
Yep. And I would say that mindset has parlayed well for all three of us into the private sector. And I'm going to close it out with that thought. I want to thank Tu for being here today, for sharing legitimate history-based wisdom and giving me a better picture in my head than Kung Fu Theater when it comes to ninjas. Tom, like new shit, always come through dropping wisdom right there on that last one, man. That was heavy. If you had any doubt the difference between a sheepdog and a wolf, you just figured out what it was. And for all of you out there that are taking the time out of your day to spend it with us, we greatly appreciate it. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, tell your friends about us, crush your cages, and until we meet again, take care.